All right. Hello, friends. So I wanted to make a podcast and get a little bit of dialogue going and at least share some of my thoughts around what's happened over the past 24 hours with the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Also, what other aspects I have started to notice unfold in the social fabric, social consciousness, and how we as individuals, as sovereign beings, can use moments like this to understand more about our individual awareness. The reason why I find this to be such an influential moment is because we quickly begin to see the maelstrom of emotions and narratives on a complete spectrum beginning to become generated, starting to come forth. You have what I have seen, at least, the complete abandonment of dialogue and almost this immediate sway into hate or persecution or anguish. I've seen people start to unfold martyrdom narratives around this whole situation. And before we get too much into that, I feel it begs an even bigger question about what do we value as humans? Do we value human life? Do we turn a blind eye to the millions of deaths around the world that come from preventable situations? And then when there's something that is so simply charged and outrageous that we all of a sudden have a deeper value for empathy and compassion. And that's something that I have personally was sitting with yesterday. I was talking to this individual actually who I don't really think knew much about this individual, about Charlie. I think he just kind of heard about it and it was a topic of conversation. And he brought up a very good point. He was like, it seems to me like the world is losing humanity, our humanity. And yesterday was one of the first times where I observed that and thought, wow, I actually may tend to agree with that statement. Because I am normally a very positive, optimistic individual. I'm always looking at the bright side of what's happening. I'm always focusing on how do we amplify the blessings and the goodness of life. But what I saw yesterday felt to me like a very dystopian fractal of possible reality. It felt like I was watching the beginning of a movie, like the introduction of a movie beginning to unfold, where it sets the stage and the narrative around a specific event that begins to alter the course of history, and then the movie begins to unfold in this dramatic cataclysm of aftermath. And while I did not particularly like Charlie Kirk, while I did not particularly agree at all with a lot of his views, I actually found him to be very antagonistic. I found him to be um, very I found him to ride a very fine line. And I think a lot of the conversations that he was having around specific governmental political discourses, I found that to be a very good thing. But a lot of his ideologies that come from Christian nationalist views, a lot of his ideas that came from or that were addressing social events, specifically around different demographics of people, I did not agree with the way he was having those conversations. I thought they could be very inspirational to a younger generation that was not rooted in empathy or compassion, but rather focused on uh, anger, persecution, elitism, classism, and ultimately hate. And I think when with those types of conversations, it's very easy to inspire uh, young, undeveloped minds who don't think for themselves to just follow a bandwagon. And ultimately, that is what I really see happening with all political events. That's what I see with all political parties, is that they focus on a narrative to get people emotionally charged and riled up, and then not actually ask the bigger questions about what's actually going on here. Why do we want this? Why do we not want that? And what I saw with uh, some of my friends online is that people who have been lifelong Democrats were really speaking out against the amount of lack of empathy or hate that was really coming from a more liberal, from people who identify as liberal. And I saw a lot of people on the conservative side starting to give narrations of martyrdom. And I think that's kind of a dangerous, I think it's a slippery slope, I should say, to go down. Um, like I said, I did not agree with Charlie Kirk. I did not agree with a lot of his antagonistic styles of debate. However, I will live and die on the idea of freedom of speech. I believe that that is crucial to having conversations. And what I think really upsets me about this is that, and this is why I feel so disconnected from the political spheres or parties, is that it doesn't seem like either side wants to actually meet a resolution to where both sides feel like there was progress forward. It seems to be one ideology and worldview versus the other, and we are going to try to antagonize and rally as many individuals behind it as we can, and that's the best we can do. And I just don't agree with that. I don't think that's the best we can do as humans for a new political unfolding to occur. I'm very disappointed by a lot of the uh, antagonistic death chants that I saw. I deeply, I deeply feel for what Charlie's family is going through. I cannot possibly fathom what it's going to be like to see a parent killed on the media and growing up knowing, that is my father or mother. I think that's a very uh, sad and traumatizing and unfortunate situation to be in. I also understand why people might want to antagonize further with death chants around his name, because there are groups of people that have felt unsafe. There are groups of people that have been uh, had forms of anger and violence cast at them for around narratives that that some conservative groups and individuals cast around specific topics. And I can understand that perspective, but for me as an individual, I have been developing a deeper relationship with what I value around what it means to be human and what it means to have humanity, to understand empathy and compassion. How this all plays into our development of consciousness and the increased awareness as individuals. Our awareness is the strongest thing in the world. It has the ability to create our lives based around what we focus on. It has the power to filter and create ideas, beliefs, and perspectives. It's also what I see continually weaponized against the general human population. We have our emotions, which I find are intentionally stoked to harness that attention and that energy and drive it in a specific way. And that's ultimately how I see political machines working, is they create a dichotomy. They create polarization. Good guy, bad guy, now go do this. That's ultimately how Trump became president, was he harnessed the hearts, minds, and emotions of a group of people who felt like they were getting the short end of the stick. And then once he had their support, from my view, he's basically doing nothing but to serve his Christian nationalist donor class and progressing an ideology that I think a majority of his supporters don't agree with. So back to this element of awareness. Yesterday, I found myself in almost like a bubble, almost slightly disconnected from the world. Maybe it was a sort of a trauma response. I don't know. I don't really think so. There's plenty of stuff happening yesterday that I think could be responsible for that, though. I found myself looking at all of these world views, all of these little dreams that people were living and creating and generating for themselves online. And I just saw how truly powerful the propaganda machine can be. And as mystics, as a part of this whole path of self-realization, of spiritual sovereignty, I think it's very important that we, as much as we are turning inward to explore our own inner psycho, spiritual, mental, emotional world, we also need to look outwardly and view and see how these touch points of society and culture are potentially being used to weaponize individuals, populations, groups of people to serve a larger and bigger agenda. And by no means am I saying, is there a conspiracy theory behind this? I am simply saying, where are the bumper rails being guided with people's energy, attention, and emotions? Because it's very easy, and this is actually a mystical view that I view about how the dreams of the world and the societies and the cultures are generated, which is that if you can generate enough attention and if you can stoke enough emotional, mental energy, and if you generate a path forward for people, and if you push them down that path, you have now enrolled an entire group of people into a dream that has been created or architected to fulfill a certain intention or outcome. This is really how I see a majority of the world. You have people in these positions of power that are saying, we want X to occur. How do we get that to occur? Well, we need enough people to do Y. And if enough people to do Y, Z will follow. And this is the same across corporations. This is the same across politics, religions, local communities, governmental factions, war, everything, every major organization that has any sort of power to it needs the enrollment of the masses in order for their dream to become a reality. This is where you start to have a understanding of the various formulas of magic and the elemental forces of creation. This is why this underlying dream building type of paradigm is why the Illuminati conspiracies or these like occult symbology, this is how those two things are connected. Because if you can architect a dream and if you can invoke specific energies or symbols into the minds of people, into the subconscious or the active minds of people, you have now thousands or hundreds, thousands or millions of people that are shaping their consciousness around a specific intention or point of view. And that is how dreams are created. This is a facet of consciousness that creates the world. When you add in other mystical, magical elements and use different forces of nature or different energies, you are infusing different qualities of awareness into whatever it is you're trying to create. Just how a magician follows formulas to create an outcome, propaganda machines, corporate marketing machines use symbols, emotions, and principles that are ingrained in the psyche of humanity. My point with all of this is to observe what's happening and ask what could be an intended outcome for this? Am I being enrolled? Am I being wrapped up and swept away in somebody else's game? In order for the world to change, at this point, from my view, in order for the world to change, there needs to be a new level of awareness that a large group of people have adopted. There needs to be a level of consciousness, and there needs to be expanded awareness enough so that people can rise above these lower natures, these lower human natures that are exploited. Fear, hate, anger, sadness, a sense of superiority, degrees of morality that come from thousands of religions that are thousands of year old based on like old cultural paradigms. Like if you just look at a majority of the issues in the world, they come from these Judeo Islamic, Abrahamic religions. And in order for the world to change and actually step into that next evolution, I think more people need to focus on expanding their own awareness, becoming more sovereign in their individual heart, mind, and energies, and make their world a potential nexus point or anchor point for the next evolutionary dream of humanity to exist in. I don't have all the answers at all. What I do know is that when we begin to go deeper inside ourselves, when we start to take complete responsibility for our lives, for our spirit, for our emotions, for our thoughts, for the things that we allow to exist in our unconscious, when we approach our healing and traumas from a place of compassion, empathy, love, and truth, we begin to transform. We begin to awaken. And if enough people do this, it will begin to expand that frequency of wakefulness, of awareness in the greater vibrational force that exists on this planet. The path that I have found to do this, the most direct, has been mystical meditation, meditating in light, having direct experiences with light that begin to dissolve these filters and perceptions and conditionings that skew our connection to our true self, to our essence, and to who we really are as an individual being, as an individual manifested expression of infinite and eternal consciousness. And when we become more in touch with that of the fulfillment of that essence, of the complete merging and unfolding, of allowing that divinity within to express itself to the fullest ability, when more people focus on that, I believe that is the fast path to changing the world. So that's why I'm so big on the path of mysticism, is because you learn to engage with your consciousness and you begin to have experiences with different depths of awareness, with different qualities of attention and energy. And as a result, your world begins to change around you because you are beginning to interact with the very fabric of your perception and your reality. The New Agers like to say you're changing or you're raising your vibration, and that's actually what is happening. But you are just you're becoming more true to your true vibration rather than allowing the vibrations of external forces and centers of gravity to influence the world and the worldview that you choose to live and adopt or experience. The second thing that has fundamentally changed me and that continues to help me every day is working with the plant medicine peyote. That has been one of the most fundamental allies and healing forces in my life. I did not look for it. It found me. It's different. When I was 18, I wanted to work with them. I wanted to try the mushroom. And I did. But when I was 27, 28, the peyote found me. And that medicine has shown me many things. That entire medicine tradition has shown me a great new depth of understanding of our consciousness, what it means to be human, the opening and flowering of our heart, and more importantly, our connection to the earth, our symbiotic relationship with our ecosystem and our environment, and how we are continually not separate from these things. The yogic traditions, they get to this point where they say, everything is one consciousness, right? But in the plant medicine traditions, you experience those consciousness. You experience those other facets and aspects of consciousness. And when you begin to merge with when you begin to merge your awareness with the awareness and the consciousness of other living beings of nature, you can't go back from that. You just begin to see that you are this matrix webbing of light that is having these other interwoven connections with these other matrices of light. You begin to experience the physical and the spiritual nature of common plants, common creatures of nature. You begin to see your brother or your sister of humanity as stars that are in their own process of becoming brighter. So I think this is a very interesting time to be alive. I don't have all the answers, but I do have what has worked for me. And that is what I continually love to share. Because this is, I believe, a part of my life and part of my purpose is to share these things. Because they have changed me for who I am. They've brought me actually back into who I really am, into alignment with that highest expression of truth that I am able to comprehend or understand. So I really hope that in the midst of all this maelstrom of chaos and frustration and anger, that you take a moment and just step back from it and center yourself in your own heart. And you work towards the world that you want to see exist. Rather than getting into fights on the internet with people on either side, on any side, focus on bringing the dream of the world that you want to experience into reality and do what you can do to make that better. Don't let these outside forces, don't let these intentions of control, of dominance, use you as a leveraged pawn in their game. Take your divine wrath and sadness and frustration and give that back to nature, to God, to whatever you believe in, and pour that energy into yourself to remove the barriers and the obstacles that you believe are stopping you from achieving your truest potential and what you believe is stopping the world and humanity from evolving into that next dream where all human life is valued. And when I say all human life, I truly mean all human life. The children and civilians in Gaza, the individuals that go hungry in parts of the world, the homeless that live on the streets here in the United States, the women across the world that live in systems of control and oppression. And I would even go so far as to say the animals and the living beings that we have misjudged and misunderstood to be lesser than us, so that they are constantly dealing with our byproduct of industrialization, of pollution, that are abused to become food in these industrial machines that feed the masses. I think humanity, in order to really become enlightened and liberated and free, needs to look at all aspects of itself, so that we can begin to root out systems of control, oppression, injustice, so that we can become more balanced and in harmony with nature. That's all I have to say for now. So, see you later. Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe on my YouTube channel, on my Spotify podcast, and follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you guys later.